Just like the street lights lit this town, like a fire in a blaze, gotta burn it down. Can't be afraid to leave this out. We got this far, don't know how. I see danger in your eyes. They know we'll burn down the night. Coming just like the sunrise. You know that we're gonna let it rain. Tonight, we're gonna let it rain. Tonight, we're gonna let it rain. Just like the sunrise, we're gonna let it rain. Just like a spark that's breaking out. Can't make a stop, can't turn back now. We know that there's no room for doubt. No, we can't turn back now. I see danger in your eyes. They know we'll burn down the night. Coming just like the sunrise. You know that we're gonna let it rain. Tonight, we're gonna let it rain. Tonight, we're gonna let it rain. Just like the sunrise, we're gonna let it rain.
Hello, everyone. Happy Tears Day, or Tuesday, as you English speakers call it. It's New Year's Eve, and we're getting close to the end now, aren't we? In more ways than one. But today we're going to time travel a little bit. We're going to go back in time to do one of the shows that was supposed to be in the Atheist Advent. That we just completed most of December, getting some of the most important secular accomplishments through all of history that gave us the wonders of the modern age. As it happens, this show had to be postponed because of some bullshit in the community. And suddenly a wave of people started throwing death threats in my general direction, which, as you can understand, is a bit of a problem. I mention that not just because this show was postponed because of that, but because the people who did that are planning to do it again. So just postponing a show may not be the appropriate response. Stay tuned on that, I suppose. Oh, goodness. I'm joined by Lil. How the hell are you?
I'm pretty good. My dogs are being a little strange, but life with dogs.
Adventures with Puppos. Now, let's see. I do still want to get to the rocks. The rocks that we also did for Advent. I have rigged up this little foldy tripod with a little phone holder gizmo, and I'm hoping it will fit this tablet, my pseudo phone. Like it looks like a phone, but it doesn't actually do phone things, but it can receive Wi-Fi. So it's basically a tablet. And I'm going to try to set it up looking at like some kind of table surface, maybe where I keep my laptop and my hats, something, and I'll set up the rocks there with that as a second camera. It'll be fun. I have to actually do the tinkering to put that together, to make the space for that to happen. Oh my goodness. I'm also plotting and scheming shows for the coming new year. We're starting, because we've been building on science and knowledge as we go along, we're starting to get more part 2s of things coming up. The consciousness show that AJ joined us for yesterday, we're going to do a part 2 of that to get deeper into the science and the history of cognitive science. But also misinterpretations is going to be dropping by sometime soon, TM, to talk about dissociative identity disorder, because I don't know very much, and it seems I know a lot more than most people. And this is the kind of thing that more people should know about. So we're going to get into that. And there's a bunch of other stuff. Later this week, we've got pseudoscience part 2, how pseudoscience spreads, which incidentally has some bearing on the drama that keeps coming in our general direction. Actually, it's not even a general direction. It's specifically targeted. But again, more on that later. So today, scientific method. Before we get into this, what are your thoughts, Lil? Like, what is the scientific method? Where did it come from? What has it helped us to accomplish? Could we have done what we've done in a different way? Thoughts?
As far as doing things that we do in a different way, it's so hard to take our own biases and put them aside and look specifically like at the data. And I think the scientific method is probably the best way that we've found to be able to do that, to not only have this whole system of how you propose a hypothesis and then you experiment with it and then you see where it leads and then you have people peer review it and so on and so forth. So you make sure that at least what you think is going on is probably roughly what's going on. If everything bears out. And the thing that I absolutely love about it is every single scientist I know absolutely loves to be proven wrong, because that means that there's something else out there that they didn't think of, and there's something else out there to chase.
It means we learned something new, which is the fucking point. I'm so excited. People are like, why you don't want to be wrong. That's why what the atheists do, and that's why what agnostics do, and so on and so forth. I'm like, no. I love being wrong, because then I learn something new. It's exciting to learn new things, not just because of the new fact, but like we've been building up on this entire fucking series, the new fact starts to connect to other things I know, and it starts to form new perspectives, new ways of seeing the world, and it weaves together a whole new synthesis. It can give us what we will get to in a future show, a paradigm shift just from one new fact. It's a snow, and it's really cool. It's one of my favorite things. So yeah. Brent says, I love being right. So that forces me to keep an open mind. I get that, right? Like, our objective as skeptics is the goal of wanting to believe as many true things and as few false things as possible. And that makes sense. But I do it from the other end. My bias is that I'm probably wrong. And that's why I keep trying to test what I know, because if I am wrong, I want to know it if I reasonably can, so I can stop being wrong, you know? Fortunately, I'm often wrong. Oh, goodness. Brad also says, just so you know, I'm a science and math teacher, and I will crash out in the chat if you say wrong things about the scientific method. No pressure, though. Just as long as
I
you
don't
don't
think we're worried too much about that.
because this is a live show. We are going to say wrong things. Mistakes happen. Misspeaking happens. You don't have to send a death mob against us over it, you know? Or join a death cult, as the case may be. Not that I'm referring to any particular person that we haven't seen in the chat in a few weeks for exactly that reason. Oh, yeah, I do it from the other end. Oh, no. I'm a strong believer. So Brent says, I do it from the other end. Ember, phrasing girl. I grew up around Shakespearean actors. I intend my puns, and I think other people should have the courage to do so. My double entendres are carefully crafted so that I can make a pretense to innocence while actually deliberately trying to send your mind into the gutter. It's sort of a game that the Shakespearean actors like to play. In fairness, it's not just the Shakespearean ones. They're just more overt about it than the other thespians. Anyway. Oh my goodness. All right. Yeah, let's get into it. There's other notes I could do, but I'm going to save most of them because I don't want to spoil some surprises. It'll be fun. You're going to love what's coming. Also, bonus show tonight. Probably it's currently scheduled for 8 p.m. Eastern. I may do it sooner depending on time and availability. So make sure you're subscribed and have the notification bell turned on so that when bonus shows happen, especially when they go live at unpredictable times, you get a notification because we'd love for you to join us. But if you're new here and you're joining us for the first time, we do these shows every weekday at 11 a.m. Eastern, covering science, philosophy, history, art, all kinds of interesting things that help build our understanding of the secular world. And I fucking love it. But in any case, I'm a little chaotic today because I was up way too late last night working on a thing which I keep alluding to but won't actually say because I don't want to spoil the surprise. It'll be neat though. All right, scientific method. Where does it come from? Where does it go? And who the hell thought Cotton Eye Joe was a good idea? Seriously, have you ever heard the lyrics of the whole song? It is so racist. It's unreal how fucking racist that song is. And there's all these white people playing it at every fucking wedding. I'm like, what are you doing? Oh, anyway, I digress. All right, so scientific method. There's a couple of different ways to look at the history of this. There's the formal scientific method, and then there's the underpinnings, the historical developments that led us to that. As is so often the case, we're going to start back in ancient history because things today are built on things that came before. That's how time works, right? Don't tell me I need to do an episode explaining that's how time works. I may do that anyway because it sounds interesting. All right. In ancient times, at the time, this isn't where it actually begins. It's the beginning of the history of the scientific method. At the time when the two great cultures of ancient Greece and ancient Persia were seeking dominance and fighting wars at Thermopylae and Plataea, it is easy to forget that these two cultures also had a deep mutual respect and traded ideas and knowledge. Well, a mutual respect might be a bit of a reach. Also, I should point out, my mouth hurts a lot because I've been doing a lot of talking the last several days. And as I've mentioned before, I have a prosthetic device and it doesn't fit because it's a whole story. It's not important right now. It doesn't fit and it rubs against the inside of my mouth and it started to develop sores, which makes it hurt. Which rubs even more, which makes sores, which makes it hurt. And it's my mouth hurts and it's starting to be a problem. So I just want to throw that out there in case I suddenly need to cut way back on my talking. But also still planning a bonus show later tonight because I'm a crazy person. Anyway, So saying mutual respect might be a bit of a reach, right? Like they understood that there were things of value in the other culture. They understood that, you know, the Greeks had better spears, but the Persians had better metalworking things. And so whatever the case may be. So they traded because they wanted what the other had, not necessarily because they respected the other. You know, I don't know that respect was really a thing at the time, but it's not important. But there was trade. And also, this is a little bit of an oversimplification, because when we say ancient Persia, what do we mean? Do we mean the Assyrian Empire? Do we mean the Babylonian Empire? Do we mean the Second Assyrian Empire? Do we mean the Neo-Babylonian Empire, also called the Chaldeans? What are we talking about, you know? So
there were a few there.
Right. And also, ancient Greece wasn't really a thing until Alexander. It was a bunch of city-states who lived in an area we now call Greece. And they spoke kind of sort of the same language, you know? They weren't a collective by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, Thermopylae is a famous battle specifically because they had such a hard time forming alliances for the purpose of mutual defense. Like they didn't even work together when it was obviously in their own self-interest, but whatever. All right. So the point is, the reason I mention all that is because this article, while it's got useful information, it is very much from the perspective of the present, using present ideas and layering them onto the past. And that's not right. Okay. Unsurprisingly and fittingly, our history of the scientific method will start here. Although we could go back. We could go back quite a ways, but never mind. Although we must point out that knowledge knows no boundaries. Well, I mean, it does. It's illegal in the United States. You can't bring knowledge across the boundaries of the United States. But never mind.
Yeah.
Whilst Babylonian, Indian, and Egyptian astronomers, physicians, and mathematicians developed some empirical ideas, the Greeks were the first to develop what we recognize as the scientific method. Well, I mean, they formally developed things that we recognize as elements of what we now call the scientific method. Yeah. But I digress. Initially, the ancient Greek philosophers did not believe in empiricism and saw measurements such as geometry as the domain of craftsmen and artisans. Silly math. Who needs to understand things to understand things? Philosophers such as Plato believed that all knowledge could be obtained through pure reasoning. No, Plato specifically made a point of that was one of his most famous arguments from absurdity, is showing that you can't there's a lot of things you can't get to by just reasoning alone, but never mind. And that there was no need to actually go out and measure anything. Oh my goodness. Taking measurements, it's so much work. No, what was really going on, there was a bit of a bias against more advanced forms of math because there were the philosophers, the people who did the thinky thing, and then there were the mathematicians, the people who did the advanced math, because they weren't just mathematicians. They were an actual cult. Pythagoras, the famous mathematician, ran a school where they got into all kinds of what we would now call occult woo-woo nonsense based on the shit they were finding in math. It's honestly a lot like what we hear from people who research quantum physics today. You know, they posit all kinds of woo-woo stuff, like whether you're observing reality changes how it happens and whatnot. And it's pseudoscience level bullshit, but it's in the mainstream because nobody cares to take the time to debunk them yet again, because they've been debunked so many. Like there's one person who does presentations for the Royal Society, and he likes to say, if you can demonstrate how the observer effect works without it being magic related to the action of observing, I've got £1 million prize for you. And people have done it for like 80 years, you know? It's a thing that's been debunked longer than that person has been alive, but he's still saying there's a prize for proving it wrong as if it were a demonstration that his superstition is still the consensus, you know?
Yeah, it's madness.
It gets pretty nuts.
Yeah.
Speaking of nuts, secular feelinist. No, we're not talking about that. Secular feelinist says you're charged with smuggling science across state lines. It's now a federal level offense. You have to keep your science in the state it originates from. We're probably not far from that, honestly.
I was about to say.
Oh my goodness. I mean, like, oh, fucking hell. Like, one of the first day one things was to cut a fuck ton of federal funding for science.
Yeah.
And now we're like actively suppressing science.
Mm-hmm.
We're not just not funding it. We're like, whatever. We're not doing politics today. This does sound strange to us, but there were some good reasons for this, however. Discussing Platonism would take an entire website in itself, so the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy is a great source for those interested in learning more. Incidentally, our backup article for today is from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy on this subject. So it's almost like saying we should go read that instead. No, okay. Platonism. What we understand to be Platonism, and it does deserve its own episode, and maybe we'll do that someday, maybe. But for our purposes today, it's the idea of forms. It's saying that things that exist are the manifestation of multiple overlapping forms taking shape in reality. For example, let's take a chair. A chair is very simple, and it comes up a lot in philosophy. So a chair has to have the form of a chair, the ideal chair, the shape of a chair, what constitutes ultimate chairness. While any specific chair will be an inferior copy, it's a projection of that shape. It's a shadow of the true thing on the cave wall, which is reality. That's the cave wall. This is where this comes from, is the cave story. And is it in the Republic? It's not important. But it's one of Plato's thingies. But there's other elements to it too. It's not just the pure form of chair being projected on the cave wall. It's also, what is it made of? If it's made of wood, then it has the form of wood being projected onto it too. If it has a cushion, then it has the form of softness being projected onto it too, and so on. Every object is a combination of all the various fundamental descriptive aspects of it, as if descriptors were things. It's a fun idea, but even Plato never took it seriously because it's just a thought framing device, But his student Platonius was a very dim child, and he took it not just seriously, but literally. And we ended up with Christianity. But that's another topic for another time. Aristotle, the one of Plato's students who paid the most attention in class and actually took notes, regarded as the father of science, regarded by some, I suppose. Although, in fairness to Aristotle, it was he who separated the sciences out from the philosophies. He set down in forms, for lack of a better term, the original 6 sciences, physics and what we now call medicine, although I think he called it something like physicerness or something, physicianiness, something like that. Metaphysics, which is the rules governing how physics works. It's not actually the supernatural nonsense that modern woo-woo artists like to paint it to be, but that's another topic for another time. We're touching on a lot of things as blowing by, but it's okay. It's okay. But yeah, I think there were 6 of them. It's not specifically important to this topic what the 6 were, just that he defined them as definite studies in empirical reality, separate from the sitting around thinking about things that philosophers like to do. And Because like Plato, he was very, very interested in the definitions of things. And he understood that in order to define something precisely, you often need a measurement. What is a gallon or a liter? You need a volume. That's a volume figure. So you need a measurement, you know, in order to define it. So people know what the hell you're saying. So, you know. I'm observing Brent's version of crashing out. Brent says inductive reasoning is not the scientific method. It was called natural philosophy. Oh, natural philosophy came much later. But that's we'll get into it. You're probably reading ahead. And it's fine. It's fine. Okay. So Aristotle set down this what we now call the sciences. That's why we still get a PhD to demonstrate mastery. In fact, more than mastery, because a master's degree is a separate thing. A PhD stands for Doctor of Philosophy. It's weird that you would get a Doctor of Philosophy to demonstrate your top level understanding of theoretical physics, for example. But that's why, because Aristotle established these schools as branches off from philosophy. And over time, many other sciences have branched off of those. Chemistry, for example, is a specific form of physics that deals with atomic interactions, not subatomic, because that's subatomic physics, not molecular, because that's what atoms do, is make molecules, but it's not cellular. That's getting into the realm of biology, which is a different branch off site, you know? So there's specific disciplines. Biology has a bunch of branches too. Like what is it? We looked it up the other day. Treeology, arborology. I know that's not right, but we'll go with it. That's why I was just going to go with it, because I don't want to get hung up on it. Because it's not important what it's called. Oh my goodness. So
my question is, where does history fit in? Because you get a PhD in history, you also get a PhD.
Yeah, a doctor of philosophy and history. Because history is itself philosophical. Like there's elements of philosophy. Some sciences still have a whole lot of it. Psychology, for example, is riddled with philosophical thinking, which reduces the effectiveness of the empirical process in some situations, but it's also partly necessary because there's a lot of things we can't directly measure, because it's when we're dealing with psychology, it's not just the brain, that's neurology, it's behavior. And my goodness. And Jur says, Lil, you have an echo when you speak. I don't. Oh, that's probably my setup. Sort of like the problem we had with Jess before, because I cannot use headphones because my ears are fucked up and I can't get a physician to treat them for reasons. And so I have to use a speaker. I cannot use headphones. And so my speaker's all the way over there and my microphone is right here. But sometimes when the pickup on the microphone self-adjusts a little too loud, or the speaker gets a little too loud, but it's mostly the microphone, because something in Windows keeps turning up the microphone. It'll start picking up the speaker. And so someone other than me will seem to have an echo. It almost never happens, but sometimes it does. My goodness. Okay, historians, right. Philosophical leftovers. There's a lot that we can determine through actual direct observation of historical evidence, like looking at documents and firsthand accounts and artifacts and various things. You can get all forensic science about specific historical events, but when you're painting a broad picture of history, you have clues and you have to do interpretation. And so you don't necessarily have a absolute picture of history that can be tested in the same way a model of how the atom works could be tested. And make predictions and find certain things. Sometimes you can, and it's really cool when you can, but not always.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're left with nothing more than just a pile of clay that looks wrong. And you're like, did this village get briefly conquered by the Assyrian Empire during
Exactly.
this time period where the clay is weird? Like, maybe.
That's one thing I have to tell people all the time, that as historians, we can usually only tell you what most probably happened. We can't give you a definite, this is the case. This most likely happened, but we're not entirely sure. I had to simp for the historians out there just a little bit. We get left out a lot.
It's true. Yeah, because history. So we like to think of history as like the people who keep the histories, but even those they can't help but be biased. Like if you read the ancient historians,
Very much,
Josephus's Antiquities or Celsus or Seneca, even everything is necessarily filtered through their own perspective, right? Like even if they try to be journalistic and they make an effort to leave out the "I think this means" bits and just report what happened, they can still only report the things they themselves are aware of, So there's always going to be a perspective bias in what's recorded in formal histories.
What's super interesting with histories that record like that is when something is written down. Like a perfect example is Roman and Greek accounts of Carthage and their child sacrifice, and they're like, later historians were like, there's no way this is a case, they just hate the Carthaginians, it was probably just propaganda, until we found out that they were right on. And it's really cool when you find that. It's something that looks biased, but it's like, no, they were actually doing this. Like, holy crap.
It's important to keep your own bias out of research for exactly that reason, because it's so tempting to take that modern bias and be like, oh, well, it could be propaganda. It probably is, because that's what our modern politicians would do. And while it's true, there was a lot of propaganda in the ancient world. Our friend of the community, Dr. Kip Davis, wrote a whole fucking book about it. That doesn't mean that what's said is propaganda. It's a possibility. It's something to keep in mind, but you shouldn't try to reach a conclusion until you have the information to conclude that. Jumping to conclusions is a bad idea, no matter which discipline you're working in. My goodness.
Yes, I do have this sitting right next to me.
Hell yeah. Jer asks, so if you have a PhD in philosophy, do you have a doctorate of philosophy of philosophy? Yes.
Oh, guys, okay, you have a PhD in philosophy, come up with something better than doctorate of philosophy, please.
I mean, it's kind of funny, but honestly, most people who get a PhD in philosophy subspecialize. For example, a couple of the people that we most frequently encounter in our mission of spreading actual fact to counter truth, TM, are Stephen Meyer, who has a doctorate of philosophy in the philosophy of science. So he has a PhD in the philosophy of science. And William Lane Craig, whose doctorate of philosophy is in theology. So we just say PhD of theology, but theology is a sub-philosophy. So in order to make it simpler, there's often that kind of specialization, but it isn't necessarily the case, like a person could get a PhD in just general philosophy if you can find a school that offers it. And then you can also drift off into the religious realm. A lot of religious institutions will also offer PhDs in certain forms of philosophy, like theology, but also other various humanities sounding areas like religion. Like, it's so weird because you could get a PhD in religious studies from an actual university, but you can also get a PhD in religion from a seminary or a Bible college. And sometimes the PhD from the seminary is actually a valid scholarly diploma, but sometimes it's just a Bible college degree, and you have to actually look up the school to tell which is which, It's so weird. It's weird that we let organizations do that.
I was about to say, Dr. Kip is whining, so I think she is offended that you're not mentioning barkology.
Is that what her doctorate's in?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry, she's been whining all morning. I don't know why.
It seemed like a good time, but she doesn't want the year to end or something. I don't know. But one thing I do know is that our wonderful person who often appears on the show, frequent co-host is the word I'm looking for, Detroit Atheist Queen Kelly King, gifted 5 memberships, and those went to Scott Newson, Madame President Piggy, I love it, Ian Kiambi, the Unlucky Legume, and Space Potato, which is a great name as well. Thank you, Kelly. That's awesome. Everybody do enjoy all the custom emojis voted on by the members, and all the other member perks, like the member exclusive content, the member only live stream, which I don't think I've scheduled the one for January yet. And sometimes I do more than one. You never know. But at least one. I try to always do at least one. And so, yeah, enjoy all those goodies. And also, Kelly dropping us a $5 super chat to say, love my Ember and Lilith. Thank you, Kelly. I appreciate you so much. Kelly, of course, has her own emoji because she's on here so frequently. And yeah, thank you. All right, let me see here. What did I miss while I was doing things? I think I might be caught up. I don't know. I just work here. It's fine. Birthday says Kip dog PhD OG. You seem to be muted.
Aunt Jer also said Dr. Kip Dog, Doctorate of Barkology.
There we go. Yes, the doctorate of Borkology. Yes. I wish I had Ryan. I need the doggy ad that you could.
Yes, yes.
Actually, maybe I could probably get it, but I'd have to change the theme of the show over to Jav and Jugs to get into the Jav and Jugs files, and that may not work on the show that's currently in progress. I wonder.
I don't know.
I wonder what would happen if I try. Let's find out for science. Okay, suddenly we're in Jav and Jugs. Behold, Borkology.
Sometimes I chill or hang out at the bar, but I never stay long or go very far. You could say I am lame or that I am fickle, but I'd rather be at home playing with my pickle. That's my dog, she's a big deal. That's my dog, let's keep it real. Don't take offense if I don't answer the phone. Instead I'm loving on my girl and giving her a bone. People call me a dud, like a busted missile, but I'd rather be in my bed, petting my pickle. That's my doggy, she's a big deal. That's my dog, let's keep it real. That's my dog, she's a big deal. That's my dog, let's keep it real. It's not that I don't like you or wanna hang out, but if I had to choose, never was there a doubt. If you need to feel good, in fact it might tickle, you should come to my house and wrestle with my pickle. my big deal. That's my dog, let's keep it real.
Neat trick, huh?
I love that video. That video is fantastic.
And hey, we did a science. We concocted a hypothesis. I wonder if I can play the video even though we're on the wrong show setup for it. We arranged a test. Let's try. And then we conducted the experiment and observed the results. And also, avast. We're pirating shit from completely different shows.
Hey,
and honestly, I love that for us. So yeah, we have demonstrated the sides today. Fuck yeah. Oh goodness. Oh my. Let's see. All right, I'm trying to catch back up on the chat because I just switch everything around. It's fine. There's some stuff going on about Islamism. I don't know. It's probably fine, but yeah. All right. I'm just so amused that actually worked. It should not have worked. Let's continue on. All right. Aristotle, empirical measurements. He believed that knowledge could only be gained by building upon what is already known. Kind of. I mean, this is one of those turtles all the way down situations. Like, you can discover something completely unrelated and then later incorporate it into the web of knowledge. This is how children learn, right? Like, you're just kind of moseying around doing your baby thing, and suddenly you realize that when people say mama, it means a specific person, and you can make that noise too. Like, you're not building on existing knowledge. It's just a new discovery that later gets connected to other things. But I'm not here to argue with a guy who's been dead for over 2,000 years. I'm just pointing out that it's an interesting starting point, but like much of what comes up in philosophy, it's not strictly true, Yeah. Measurements and observation, the foundations upon which science is built, were Aristotle's contribution. He proposed the idea of this is what made Brent mad. He proposed the idea of induction as a tool for gaining knowledge and understanding that abstract thought and reasoning must be supported by real world findings. So yeah, this is poorly phrased, and again, it's from a modern perspective, because we didn't have induction, we didn't have deduction, we didn't have abduction. There were no ductions in a row or otherwise at the time. What Aristotle was talking about, and maybe we should go back and do a part 2 on the ancient fucking philosophers, because clearly this needs to be explained in greater detail. Plato stuff, Platonius' stuff, Aristotle stuff, all of this stuff. His thing was that you can't reason your way to everything. Like, you can use reason to rule out things that are obviously wrong, but to find out what's true, you have to have at least some demonstration in reality, because there's that reification fallacy. Remember, Aristotle and his band of philosophers, his students, are the ones who laid down the original fallacies, including that one, that you can't just try to argue something into existence. And this is a thing that people have tripped over century after century after century, right? Like, Aquinas had his whole thing about imagining God into existence. But Aristotle was there hundreds of years before saying, no, you can't just mental a thing into being. You have to test and see if it's real. The reification fallacy, confusing the map for the place, as they say, confusing your idea of something for the real thing. The real thing is what's real. Your idea is always going to be wrong, but you can get closer and closer if you set aside your ego and this idea that you can't be wrong, And this is what shapes science. It's the assumption that your idea is wrong, but it can be less wrong if you get your ego the hell out of the way. But the only thing that actually does show the true shape of reality is reality itself. It is the only accurate map. So that was Aristotle's thing. He applied his methods to almost everything, from poetry and politics to astronomy and natural history, which would be natural futury from his perspective on the other end of time. Kid. You know, random, but kind of related, because during Aristotle's time, there were people in Egypt, which we would call Egypt, whose job was archaeologist of ancient Egypt, because Egypt is so fucking ancient. There were Egyptologists working as a profession in ancient Egypt. There was so much Egypt, temporally speaking.
I mean, the
easy to me.
Yeah, the fact about that always drives me nuts is that Cleopatra lived closer in time to the iPhone than to the pyramids. It's like, that's one of those things about time that it's just like, holy crap. That it's just like, it's yeah.
And we have this idea from the present that history is like one unbroken chain and things get forgotten. Things do get forgotten normally, but there's also cataclysms. Like the European Dark Age that I'm constantly blaming the church for, because it is entirely their fault, is just the most recent Dark Age. There have been other Dark Ages. In fact, we're going to talk about one in a couple of days when we go over the Minoan civilization. Because if we want to build a better world in the new year to come, we need to look back at the potential better world we once had and fucked up. At least it seems like a good place to start. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah.
But yeah, what we now, it bothers the fuck out of me that we call this civilization by the name of the man who fucked it up. But it was a near utopian society, probably the basis for Plato's ideas about Atlantis. It's just, they were so fucking advanced, like ridiculously advanced compared to the rest of the world. I'm not saying they had fucking spaceships and bullshit, like you know, whatever woo-woo peddler you want to care to invoke. Graham, the fuck is his name? Hancock. Yeah, not aliens, but like they had jewelry at a time when the rest of Europe was still banging sticks together. You know, it's crazy advanced. Anyway, we'll get into them in a couple of days because it's really neat and it seems like a great way to start the new year. But I digress. Speaking of Egypt and the Minoans, I wish we'd call them the Ariadneans or something, because it's also where the labyrinth is, the legend of Ariadne, but whatever. Before we get into that, remember, folks, it's important to stay hydrated whether you're in the desert or the middle of the ocean, and we can help with that. Hey folks, I've been working hard on my health, and so far I've lost over 140 pounds. A huge part of good health is hydration. That's why I'm thrilled to partner with Epic Water Filters. Check this out. Not only can you say goodbye to expensive bottled water, but these filters are made in the US, so no tariffs, and they're made to fit your life. From these lovely pitchers I can fill from, to sink units, to portable filters that fit in your reusable bottle. With Epic, I can refill from nature's water sources and not have to worry about bacteria and whatnot. But also, send back a used filter to be responsibly recycled, and they'll send you a free replacement, saving you and the earth even more. Want to save a ton of money, be healthier, and build a better world? Head to epicwaterfilters.com and enter code EMBER15 at checkout for 15% off. Don't settle for random water. Upgrade to Epic. Hell yeah. All right, we had to get the ad in there somewhere. But also, I needed to turn down my heater again. Fred says, Google debunkers unite. Absolutely. All right, we need to pick up the pace or we're never going to even get into the Renaissance here. So, Aristotle's methods can be summed up as follows. Study what others have written. Look for a general consensus. perform a systematic study of everything even partially related to the topic, because you're going to learn a whole bunch of irrelevant stuff, but that stuff will be useful later when you study other things to connect the things together. So study everything. Now, this is sort of a shotgun approach, but it has its uses, especially when he correctly recognized he's at the very beginning end of science, when we don't know anything about anything. So let's just start learning things. This is the first sign of a scientific method, which with literature reviews, consensus, and measurements. Greeks were the first to subdivide and name the branches of science in a recognizable way, including physics, biology, politics, zoology, which I guess biology, and of course, no, biology is already there. Poetry. Yes, poetry is a science. It's true. Now, there are other arts, but never mind that. In about 200 BCE, the famous Library of Alexandria saw the first introduction of library cataloging. That's an important note, because Alexandria was not the first library.
No.
It was the first library that didn't just put books in random places. It cataloged them so you could find them. Which was sort of essential for any scholar trying to conduct a peer review about a given subject. Like, oh my goodness, we were so not organized. Okay, Muslim stuff. Now Tawhid will be happy. The early Islamic ages were a golden age for knowledge, and the history of the scientific method must pay a great deal of respect to some of the brilliant Muslim philosophers of Baghdad and Al-Andalus, which I probably mispronounced, but fuck it, we got to go on. They preserved the knowledge of the ancient Greeks, including Aristotle, through the Dark Ages, thank you, Christians, but also added to it, and were the catalyst for the formation of a scientific method recognizable to modern scientists and philosophers. The first and possibly greatest Islamic scholar was Ibn al-Haytham. Again, my apologies on pronunciation. Best known for his wonderful work on light and vision called the Book of Optics. A whole branch of physics. A physics so incredible, it entertained Isaac Newton no end for an entire year. Boop, popped into existence. Amazing. He developed a scientific method very similar to the modern one. One, state an explicit problem based on observation and experimentation. Two, test or criticize a hypothesis through experimentation. Three, interpret the data and come to a conclusion, ideally using mathematics. And four, publish. If you don't publish, it doesn't count. Was it Sapphire who called that earlier? That's right.
Yep.
And that's valid, because if you don't share what you learned, then nobody knows it, you know? So Ibn al-Haytham brilliantly understood that controlled and systematic experimentation and repeatable experiments, that's why we publish. Repeatability is so important to get rid of those flukes, like the body lost 17 grams upon death, therefore there's a soul, you know? You got to be able to repeat it. So yeah, his experimentation and measurement were essential to discovering new knowledge built upon existing knowledge. His other additions were the idea that science is a quest for ultimate truth. Well, that's a bit of a problem, but whatever. We can keep questing. That's fine. And that one of the only ways to reach that goal was through skepticism and questioning everything, including the Holy Quran, because Allah gave you the brains to ask questions with and will look dimly upon those who do not do it. Other Muslim scholars' further contributions to the scientific methodology, not now, Google. I'm not talking to you. Refining it and preserving it, Al-Biruni understood that measuring instruments and human observers were prone to error and to bias, and so proposed that experiments need replication many times before a common sense average was published. See, we're seeing lots of important stuff that we hear about in our science education classes today, but almost nobody points out that these are Islamic scholars who came up with this stuff, which is part of the whitewashing of Western culture. Is
very much
history
so.
gets taught with like, look at Isaac Newton, look at Immanuel Kant, look at Galileo, look at all these European white dudes who did these great contributions. And then when we come to other cultures' contributions, we don't get specific names. We don't get dates and achievements and their life stories. We just get, also, repeatable experiments are important, and then on to the next thing until we can praise the next European. So it makes it look like Europeans invented everything. In reality, Europeans invented, people from Europe did make significant contributions, absolutely. But in reality, population-wise, the Europeans contributed less than most other cultures. In China, for example, where they also practiced what we would call serfdom, if a person demonstrated an aptitude for mathematics or engineering or invention or even art, they would often, not always, but often be removed from serfdom so that their gift could be better utilized by the empire. That's still not great from a humanist perspective, but it is a much better utilization of human potential than what the Europeans were doing, which was, however you're born, that's how you die, and fuck however you could help other people. Maybe you could have cured cancer in the year 1200, but you were born to a serf, so fuck you, and fuck everyone else too, So the Europeans actively repressed human potential. If they made great strides, it was through pure luck or in spite of the way they ran their society, thanks to the Christians. Okay. Al-Rawi, in the 9th century, was the first scholar to use a recognizable peer review process. And that's another thing. Like, reviewing the literature is great, but having your contribution reviewed by your peers, that's even better.
Yeah.
Is it Pixie having opinions?
That's Kip.
Oh, okay.
She's way in the yard.
Like, I'm approaching the point where I feel like I should be able to tell the doggos apart by their borks.
Pixie howls. She doesn't bark, she howls. She's a little hound dog, and Daisy kind of does both. But yeah, like it's nice. Daisy's not a hound dog. Pixie is a hound. It is nice to be able to have your paper or whatever you're working on reviewed by people who know just as much, if not more, than you do, so you can see if it's actually some idea that has some like standing and some that has some grounding, and hey, this might actually be a thing, as opposed to just putting it out there and saying this is true, this is right. It peer review is amazing. Like, peer review is a very, very, very good thing we've got going right now.
It makes science better because, I mean, for example, I haven't published in many, many years, but when I was working with Dr. Arp on the CMB power spectrum measurements, basically we were looking at the CMB data and trying to reverse it because, the cosmic microwave background radiation. You know what? This is a long story. The point is, if you get your figures wrong, peer review will say, hey, you fucked up a decimal point here. And that makes your science better, is my point. I'll skip the long story. Right? We don't have time. Okay. Abu Jabir, known as Gerber, Geber, something, an Islamic scientist often referred to as the father of chemistry, the alchemist, you might say, was the first scholar to introduce controlled experiments, as in there is a separate experiment we call the control, where you don't do the thing you're testing. Like, that's what we mean by controlled experiments. And that was a thing that had to be introduced separately. And dragged alchemy away from the world of superstition into one of empirical measurement. It's always the measurement. That's science. Observe things. Measuring is part of observing. Ibn Sina, I don't know if this is like a town or another name or whatever. But Ibn Sina, one of the titans in the history of science, proposed that there were two ways of arriving at the first principles of science: through induction, what we now call induction, because again, that wasn't a thing at the time, and experimentation. Only through these methods could the first principles needed for deduction be discovered. Kind of. And yeah. Oh my goodness. Brent says that this rocks. I'm kind of tuned out because I taught this class to high schoolers, but you're doing great. Well, thank you.
Only one crush out.
Oh, what now?
I said only one crush out earlier.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. So I guess that's another name known in the West as Abyssina. I can't pronounce Western names either.
Yeah.
But Europeans did like to give alternate names so they didn't have to say the Islamic names. Oh, it's fucking wild. Anyway.
Yeah.
Other Islamic scholars contributed to the idea of consensus in science as a means of filtering out fringe science and allowing open reviews. These contributions to the scientific method and the tools required to follow them made this into an Islamic golden age of science. However, with the decline in the Islamic houses of knowledge, the history of the scientific method passed back into the European hands with the Renaissance. And it is a lucky fucking coincidence of timing, because as we have discussed in previous episodes, it was the declining power of the church for many various reasons, as well as the weakening and fall of the Eastern Empire, that made the Renaissance possible.
Mm-hmm.
There's other external factors too, like Gutenberg's press, right? Like maybe the Renaissance would have happened without it, but that certainly made the spread of knowledge a whole lot easier to be able to print books. But the fall of the Eastern Empire was a crucial necessity to causing the Renaissance. One of many, but it was crucial. So the rise of Islamic power to overthrow Eastern Rome, Byzantium, corresponding with the turn to conservatism within the strengthening Islamic world, to the point that they turned anti-intellectual and diminished their own ability to conduct science, mirroring the same way the Christians had done it hundreds of years before. It's a lucky thing that Europe had finally started to break free of the church and could take the knowledge that the Islamic world had been keeping safe for 1,000 years and building onto in the meantime, and keep it safe while Islam went through its dark age. You know, it didn't have to be that way. Their dark age could have started before Europe was ready, and then we just lose the fucking knowledge, you know? Or maybe it'd go to Africa. Maybe we'd all be colonized by Ethiopia. Wouldn't that be swell? It'd be interesting. It'd be a very different world, possibly a more equitable world, because as I understand it, while Ethiopian culture is heavily influenced by Abrahamic religions, they're still a lot more equitable in a lot of ways than Europeans like to be.
Yeah.
Maybe we'd all be colonized by First Nations people from the Western Hemisphere. It's more plausible than you might think, but that's a topic for another time. I know people come here for the tangents, and I'm dodging all of them today, but we have so much to cover. Okay, Renaissance. The Renaissance was another turning point for the scientific method, where I should slow down. I didn't sleep much last night, and partly it's due to the dramatic things that I've been referring to, which is the reason this episode got postponed till now instead of its original slot, and also things that are coming. But also, I'm trying to do something good with the bullshit that's been happening. And so I'm trying to work with organizations that help, that do good things, to try to put together something that will take this tragic miscarriage of community strife and trying to hurt good people and use it as an opportunity to help people learn how to help people, instead of just amplifying the harm and thinking themselves white knights for doing so, you know? And I finally I heard back from some of the volunteers I've been trying to contact, got some information from them, heard back from another organization, got some information from them, and the wheels were turning, and I started synthesizing things, and I was working on the project until way late last night. So I didn't sleep very much. So I'm emotionally stressed out. I'm already emotionally exhausted from the shit that's been happening all month and continues to fucking happen. And now I have no sleep on top of it. So I'm a little loopy. I appreciate y'all bearing with me. And in fact, I warned Lil I'm a little unstable today because of all that. And I realize I am tangenting to describe all of that. But the reason I'm doing so is to explain why I'm a little loopy and why I keep stopping myself, because I can sense I'm about to go off into not just a tangent in the way I normally do, but sort of a tirade.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to explain that I'm trying to pull myself back from those things because I'm exhausted in every possible fucking way. And it's really hard.
We totally understand. We get it.
It's an oof. So yeah. Renaissance. Right. It's impossible to list every single scholar, but there are some names that stand out in any narration of the history of the scientific method. Bacon! Everyone loves bacon, except, Islamic people, was one of the earliest European scholars to refine the scientific method. He developed the idea of making observations, hypothesizing, and then experimenting to test the hypothesis, which it's a small refinement on what our Islamic friends handed over to us, but an important one, because you observe, then you hypothesize, then you design your experiment. Right? They're separate steps in order. So it's different, and it's a minor difference, but it's procedurally very important. Speaking of things that are procedurally very important, Jester sent us a super chat for $5. See how I did that? I'm very smooth. And Jester, thank you, Jester. And I know it was so smooth, especially calling attention to it. Thank you, Jester. Jester says, in fairness, the gents you usually have on your channel seem generally incapable of getting a tan. I think that may be true. In fact, I mean, honestly, really, it's only Mark Reed. Who is occasionally I will have other men on, but for the most part, Mark Reed is the only regular gent who appears here. There used to be another guy who had quite a bit of melanin. Or is it melanin? I'm always confusing. It's not important. He had no problem being tan, but then he decided to be a conspiracy theory cultist and send death mobs after me. So he doesn't come around here anymore. Why is it always biologists, Lil? Why is it always evolutionary biologists who turn into crazy pseudoscience conspiracy theorists?
I do not know. But yeah. I do know a couple astrophysicists who have gone that way, or astronomers that have gone that way, but they're a lot rare. I know a chemist who's gone that way.
Okay, so in every science, there's like a certain percentage of people who tend towards the fringes, and maybe they'll do some contributions to mainstream science, but also do some woo-woo nonsense on the side, and that's fine. Isaac Newton did that. He gave us calculus, but he also liked to chug mercury and talk about spiritual essences. Whatever. As long as your contributions are peer-reviewed, which is why peer review is important, then fuck it, do what you want. We don't care. Give us the good science. We love it. It's fine. But it seems like every fucking biologist in the skeptical community, save one, possibly because he doesn't have a PhD yet. Maybe we should stop him from doing that, because maybe that's the gateway thing. They've all turned into transphobic conspiracy theorist assholes. Yeah. What is the deal?
I don't.
But it's only the skeptical ones, right? Like the mainstream, Christian, Islamic, whatever, like biologists who are not invested in this separation of church and state situation we've got going on. They don't care about it. They've got their nose in the science book. They're all very pro-human rights when asked about it. P.Z. Myers, for example, friend of the community, he would prefer to just do his damn science. But if you ask him, he will say, of course, trans rights are human rights because humans deserve human rights. You know, it's I don't understand. I don't understand.
People are weird.
It's true. But I digress. I said I've tried to avoid tangents, and I've ended up going on a completely unrelated tangent.
Hey,
but...
we're just here for the tangents. I have 2 shirts that say that, so I have to get my daily dose of tangents.
You have a shirt and a hoodie. So yeah, I'm tempted to pull up the Ember. We're not doing it right now. Again, time. Damn it, Ember. Focus. Oh, I can't even say that because it reminds me of another time somebody turned into a sudden transphobic asshole. But never mind. Right, Bacon. Importance of induction as part of the scientific method, believing that all scientific discovery should proceed through a process of observation, experimentation, analysis, and inductive reasoning, which that maybe I think it was before we called it induction, but we were starting to do that. It's not important. To apply the findings to the universe as a whole. And that is an important thing, right? Like, in fact, some models of the scientific method today still include a bit about that as a final step is, can what you learn be generalized? Do you need to devise a new experiment and go through the process again? But think about the applications. Can what you learn be generalized or applied to other things? So yeah. He also believed that experimental evidence could be used to eliminate conflicting theories and move closer to truth. And that has helped a lot because it gives us the ability to scientificify things that aren't readily accessible to the sciences. For example, you can measure a liter of water, you can measure a pound of dirt, or a kilogram, as the case may be, but you have a hard time measuring a person's thoughts. But by creating conflicting evidence, we can design an experiment that distinguishes between these two theories, right? You form a hypothesis. If you provide a certain stimulus, humans will behave in X way. And then you have your conflicting hypothesis that if you provide that stimulus, humans will behave in Y way. And then you can set up an experiment and see what actually happens. Now, humans are messy because we're strange beasties. But you can use methods like that to determine things about human behavior. You're not going to get a solid, everybody does this or everybody does this, or very rarely will you get that. But you'll get percentages. You'll see 60% did this and 40% did that. And then you can start to revise your ideas and try to think about, well, why is that? What's controlling this split? Why do some people want to do the thing that the one theory said no one would want to do? And why do other people want to do the thing that the other theory said no one would want to do? Like, why is this happening? What's going on? So yeah, it made science accessible to things like psychology, which is one of the reasons that psychology is 1,000 years behind the other sciences. So it's a very important thing. Philosopher and mathematician René Descartes, by contrast, firmly believed that the universe was like a huge machine, because even though he was a great mathematician, he was a philosopher first, and he fell victim to that philosophical thing we constantly have to mention, this tendency to analogize things to being like the most complex technology humans currently have at the time they're alive. Like huge machines, like a clock tower or something. Therefore, if you understood the basic laws of the universe, you could deduce how anything will act. Now, this is a sort of underpinning, a metaphysics, if you will. The idea that, and we still see this in a lot of quantum physicists and other physicists today, is if you can pin down just a few more of the unknowns and the fundamentals of how the universe behaves, and you start with a piece of information like the actual state of a given atom or an electron even at a given time, then you can, from that and the use of this knowledge of the laws of the universe, extrapolate every other piece of knowledge about the universe. Things don't work that way, but there's this idea that maybe they do, even though there isn't really a reason to think so, other than wouldn't it be nice if it did? But whatever. Galileo. We remember Galileo, one of our besties, who really pissed off the church, but managed to avoid being burned at the stake. But once again, we don't talk about Bruno. Galileo is generally remembered for his famous gravity experiment. For those of you who are new, I should explain, because jokes are funnier when you explain them. Bruno was another astronomer who was also promoting the scientific fact that the sun does not go around the earth, and the church burned him to death for it, for speaking facts, observable facts that other people could observe for themselves. Because that's when people start bandying around truth, especially with moral overtones. Watch out for the torches and pitchforks. Not saying that for any particular reason that has immediate relevance to what's going on in the broader community right now. No. Just as a general idea, when people start bandying truth with moral overtones, watch out for torches and pitchforks. Okay. Physicists such as Einstein and Hawking proclaimed him the father of modern science, possibly because of his gravity experiments, but also to other things he did. Like we've mentioned that he came up with an earlier theory of relativity. And there's a lot. He did so much. It's very, very cool. Certainly, his methodology shaped physics and other fields, relying upon mathematical theorems. His methods, which were the origins of the split between science and religion, well, I mean, I dare say the two dark ages were the origin of the split between science and religion, because while there had been other dark ages, like the Bronze Age collapse, for example, where technology and learning had been lost, what we call the Dark Age was on purpose. People were dumbed down and knowledge destroyed for the purpose of controlling people. And it did a lot of damage. And then the same thing happened in the Islamic world. Like there wasn't a fault. I mean, there were empires that fell and whatnot in the Islamic world, but nothing like the collapse of Rome was, with the destabilization it caused. When one caliph went down, his territory was just annexed by every other caliph around, It just, things were chaotic, but there was no like civilization level collapse. Their dark age was entirely religious conservatism. It was, you're challenging the truth with moral overtones of Allah, and so you must be burned, and your heretical research must be burned, and et cetera, et cetera. So these dark ages are on purpose. And I think that's where the divide between science and religion happened. Because in the old days, people would do science in service to the God they believed in. And there's still scientists today who do that. There's a lot of scientists who are practicing religious people who think, like Einstein once put forward, that studying the natural laws is like reading God's blueprints. It doesn't disconfirm their God. It's just helping them to understand how God did what they believe God did. So they're not necessarily contradictory.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. So that included a standardization of measurements, allowing experimental results to be checked anywhere. Because again, we're back to measurements. They're very fucking important. Galileo used a heavily inductive scientific method because he understood that no empirical evidence could perfectly match theoretical predictions. That's true. Perfectly match, but that's why we repeat over and over and over and over and over to try to approach the true value, but that's a whole thing. Anyway, he believed that it would be impossible for an experimenter to take into account every single variable. In the world of physics, for example, Galileo theorized that mass had no effect upon gravitational acceleration. However, while today we can drop a feather in a bowling ball in a vacuum chamber, Galileo didn't have a vacuum chamber. He couldn't test his hypothesis in such an extreme condition. The best he could do was take a light thing and a heavy thing and drop them both at once. He didn't even drop them. Like, a lot of people get that experiment wrong. He didn't stand at the top of the Leaning Tower of Pisa and drop them. That's conflating two different things he did. He helped reinforce the foundation of the Leaning Tower of Pisa because he understood a lot of physics and applied it through engineering. Because of his reinforcement, the tower is still standing. If he hadn't, it would have collapsed centuries ago. But he didn't have the knowledge and technology to fix it either. He could just prevent it from collapsing the rest of the way. And then separate from that, I believe it was in Venice, he conducted an experiment where he built ramps and he rolled balls of different weights down the ramps. The idea being, if they're the same size, they will have the same friction and the same air resistance. And so it's only the mass, to the best degree of our ability to control, that should be influencing their speed. And they speed at the same rate. So it's not their mass. It's what we would later come to understand as the slope in space-time caused by the gravitational acceleration of the planet. Your mass is irrelevant on that scale. You're just being carried along with the space that's sliding into the disturbance caused by the presence of this huge mass we call the Earth. Which is a weird way to look at it, but also more true.
Yeah.
No experiment could ever hope to measure this perfectly because of air resistance, friction, and inaccuracies with timing devices and methods. However, repetition by independent researchers could build up a body of evidence that allowed an extrapolation of the general theory to be made. This period, covering the 16th and 17th centuries, is often referred to as the scientific revolution. This would be a great, if I had reverb, if I had a reverb soundboard effect, scientific revolution, and, you know, stop it, Ember, focus. I used to have a member of the community who would tell me to focus. And every time I say that, I think of him. He also blew up into a random transphobic rampage. It's weird, but I digress. The Royal Society was set up in 1660, providing a panel of experts to advise and guide, as well as oversee the spreading of information, establishing a journal to aid this process. Partly true. They did do some very important work in the dissemination of controlled science, but that's the key. Controlled science. Now, controlling science does do quite a bit to weed out pseudoscience and quackery, but it also limits the ability to access science to the people who are in the Royal Society, the aristocrats, the gentry, the nobles, the wealthy elites. If you grow up poor, fuck you. No science for you. And it's not the only purpose of the Royal Society. It may not have even been the expressly stated purpose, but it is one of the outcomes of the Royal Society, was reserving science to the realm of privilege, which in turn played a direct role in the rise of flat Earth style conspiracy theories. Remember, Parallax. I forget his real name, and it's not important. Fuck, my brain keeps trying, it wants to think of it, but it's not important. His whole deal with science was being reserved by the rich nobility, but it should be accessible to everyone. And so he wanted to do science that you could do without access to the archives and the societies and the journals and the expensive equipment, but science that anybody could do. So, you know,
yeah,
trying to be exclusive, trying to be elitist, it caused pseudoscience to happen. which was one of the things it was trying to prevent happening. So, oops.
Yeah.
No war but class war. This body ruled.
I was going to say,
Go ahead.
especially as science like progressed and it became less like intuitive, like general relativity is fairly easy if you understand it, but if it's like the first time you're hearing about it, you're like, huh? It does what now? Same thing with like quantum mechanics. It's not really intuitive.
There's people saying Hal Jordan. Samuel Robotham. Thank you, Jen. That was the name I was trying to think of. People are saying Hal Jordan. Wasn't that like a Deadpool character? Or Ryan Reynolds character? I don't. I feel like that's a comic book thing. I don't know. I'm gonna get my nerd card revoked over that. I'm sure. Oh goodness. All right. The ruling body, the body ruled. The body rules because the hips don't lie. The body ruled that experimental evidence, as always, supersedes theoretical evidence, one of the foundations of modern science. Yes, experiment always supersedes theory. What is real beats the hell out of the model. That should be obvious, but it needed to be stated expressly at some point. Naturally, the installing of a panel of experts and the founding of journals also led to genuine peer review, a process adapted from Muslim practices. This is why I really wanted to cover this article instead of one that's a little bit more accurate with some of its terminology, because this one keeps pointing to the other cultures to some extent, at least, instead of trying to claim all the credit for Europeans. Like, science is about accuracy, so let's be accurate to the degree we can reasonably in our history of science, you know? So I'm being told that Hal is Green Lantern, and he became evil at one point and was called Parallax. So that's why I only vaguely have some idea of what the hell you're talking about, because it's DC lore, which...
Yeah.
Meh.
No, I agree.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I was supposed to do a debate a while back about which was better, DC or Marvel. And because of time zone issues, I had the wrong date, or I had the wrong time set up. And so I ended up missing the debate. Some other people did it. It was still a fun thing, but I had like a whole thing set up, and it was about the nature of the stories and how characters are used. And I was going to approach it as Marvel is better, not because the superheroes are stronger or they do more cool accomplishments or whatever, but the storytelling method of how the heroes are like realer, in that they have flaws and they grow and they change and they learn and they develop and they have a story arc, which is what makes the story relatable, but also makes it possible for the reader to learn things. Whereas DC characters, they're platonic forms. You know, Superman just is Superman. Batman just is Batman, for example. You know, they don't learn, they don't change, they don't grow. And that's the point, you know? If you pick up a Batman in 1986 or 2006, it's the same character. That's on purpose. But it makes it harder to relate to the characters. It makes it harder to learn through the characters because they're incapable of learning by design, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, goodness. Chester's like, Ember.
I'm trying not to get all nerdy.
I know I'm tangenting so hard, and I know I'm going to piss off DC people with that opinion. But yeah, I know, focus. We have shit to do. We have shit to do. All right. Naturally, the installing of a panel of experts and the founding of journals also led to genuine peer review, a process adapted from the Muslim practices. Huzzah! The scientific revolution reached its zenith with Isaac Newton, arguably, although some might say not, who made perhaps the greatest contribution to the history of the scientific method. He was the first to really understand the scientific method needed both deduction and induction. Now, by really understand, we mean he had the ideas of these things as distinct defined terms, which pre-existing generations of scientists may not have had. So the history of the scientific method in the 20th century into the present. Now we're skipping a few important people like fucking Hume, but never mind, because Hume was primarily a philosopher, but the way he systematized thinking, or re-systematized thinking, I suppose, is kind of important in the way we both formulate hypotheses and analyze experimental results. It really matters, but it's not technically part of the scientific method. So we'll set it aside for now. The scientific method, as developed by Bacon and Newton, continued to be the main driver of scientific discovery for 3 centuries. However, their ideas were based, they were definitely based, at a time where most scientists were polymaths, working in many scientific fields and also understanding philosophy and theology. Science gradually, ever so slowly, began to move away from those areas and developed into a separate area of study. In addition, the increasing complexity of science and the increase in both breadth and depth, because we've been growing it for centuries and centuries and centuries, despite the Dark Ages, made it impossible for a scholar to work across disciplines. That's not strictly speaking true. There are still cross-disciplinary specialists, and they often make the coolest fucking breakthroughs. Marie Curie, for example, who still remains the only person to win 2 Nobel Prizes in different disciplines, despite the fact that she died because of the shit she didn't know and herself had to discover. Talk about a martyr for science. But yeah, working across different disciplines, it's hard, but it's possible, and we learn the most important things from interdisciplinary cooperation. But I digress. As science began to split into chemistry and physics and biology, the proto-scientific psychology, and it's important to say proto-scientific rather than pseudoscientific, because the psychologist will behave badly if you call them a pseudoscience. See, that's meta humor, because psychology is about behavior, so saying they'll behave badly. Again, explaining jokes makes them funnier. The history of the scientific method became much more complex. Physicists could remain true to the Baconian inductive methods, but psychologists began to find this increasingly difficult when dealing with the extreme variability of the human mind, as well as man-made constructs. It's so hard to get to what's real when you're swimming in a soup of human-made bullshit. But that's what you sign up for. As a sociologist, as an anthropologist, all of this human-related stuff. It's wild. So yeah. As a result, the 20th century saw a huge change in the scientific method as philosophers of science attempted to confuse this. Attempted to address this. I've never met a philosopher of science who didn't try to muddy the waters, but that's a me problem, probably. Probably the most famous of these was Karl Popper, who did actually do some good things. And this is, in fact, vital. This is the part we had to get to before we ended this episode. So, Karl Popper. Documenting Karl Popper's contribution to the history of the scientific method took up an entire book, so it is only possible to cover the main points. Actually, several entire books, but who's counting? We certainly don't count books around here.
Nope.
Popper's main point, that's a Kip Davis joke for people who are new. If you're new, subscribe, because you'll get more of the inside jokes if you do. Popper's main point of attack was establishing that science is not infallible. Well-established scientific disciplines often followed the wrong path and generated incorrect theories. On the other hand, pseudoscience, as psychology and social sciences were at the start of the 20th century, often found the right answer even if they could not follow the scientific method perfectly. This led him to question the very definition of science itself, and so he tried to develop a scientific method that addressed the limitations. Previously, the definition between science and non-science revolved around empirical techniques and the inductive method. This definition did not address the development of new disciplines and did not properly unite the increasing complexity of theoretical science with practical science. For example, why were Einstein's theories regarded as scientific, whilst a psychologist's theories were regarded as pseudoscience? Popper postulated that science advances through a process of conjecture and refutation, and that a theoretical scientist would develop a theory and an empirical scientist would attempt to test it to destruction. You have to try to break it before you know if it holds up. For this to happen, the theory had to be falsifiable. If the theory could not be properly tested by science, then it could not be scientific. For example, physics theory was open to empirical testing, and many scientists developed ways to empirically test relativity. Therefore, it could be falsified, and the scientific method did apply. Until the time of Pavlov and Skinner, psychological theories were extremely difficult to falsify because there were few quantitative methods available. Because of this, the discipline was regarded as more pseudoscientific. Even now, staunch Popperians cast doubt upon the falsifiability and therefore usefulness of psychology and the social sciences generally, which is why they still get a lot of shade. Although this is driven by more than a little scientific snobbery. So there's more. Of course, there's more. There's always more. But
Always.
we are at time, and we covered the shit I wanted to cover, getting us all the way to Karl Popper. Amazing. Despite the fact I'm 3/4 unhinged today, we fucking did it. Good job, us.
Mm-hmm.
Mission fucking accomplished. Of course, there's more to say, and maybe we'll get into some of those people in a future episode. I'm sure you noticed at the very bottom of the page, it started talking about Kuhn. There is more, but this is like the primer, the history of the scientific method. From the very beginnings of fucking writing through Karl Popper being like, hey, maybe you need to be able to prove your shit wrong. Maybe that's kind of important, because that's where we are in the debates when it comes to skepticism, humanism, human rights. Is if you propose an idea as the basis for why we should do things a certain way, and it's not falsifiable, we're not going to fucking believe you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all there is to that. So yay. Thank you all so much for joining. Before we go, I do want to thank supporty people who sent good things, because holy shit, it helps. I appreciate it very, very much. And I realize there are certain people running around who make a big deal out of YouTubers thanking people for sending them money so they can like pay for food and medicine and shit. But I'm still going to thank you anyway. So Kelly King, Detroit Atheist Queen 24/7, sent 5 gift emberships. Thank you. And a $5 super chat saying, love my Ember Lilith. We love you too, Kelly. And we're looking forward to a day you're able to join us again, because it's always neat when you're here. And Jester sent us $5 saying, in fairness, the gents you usually have on your channel seem generally incapable of getting a tan, which is probably fair. Thank you, Lil. It's always a pleasure.
Always.
And thank you all for being here and engaging and entertaining and occasionally distracting, but also occasionally telling me to get back to the fucking point, because we did the thing we set out to do, and I'm thrilled about it. Remember, bonus show later today, probably, and other things. Stay tuned, subscribe, like, use the share button. And as always, remember, you don't have to believe in unfalsifiable things, because you are better than religion. Toodles. Thanks to all our patrons and top-level members for December. Miranda, Karen Butcher, Jessica the Transmetal Alchemist, Robin Webster, Maya Adkison, Jimmy Tux, Ian Chen, Lilith, Ember Lynn, The Barely Bearable Atheist, Eric Wander, Jason Jacoby, Lil of All Trades, Deviant Outcast, Kelly King, the Detroit Atheist Queen, The Mighty Filbert, Secular Feelinist, and Geo Sam. And you can add your name here next month by signing up at patreon.com/betterthanember or by joining Emberships here on YouTube at the Cinder level, which includes all the custom emojis, tons of member-exclusive content, member-only live streams, and a bunch of other stuff. I deeply appreciate all the supporters who keep this channel going. Thank you so much. Because of you, we're building a wonderful community that I'm very proud of.
Just like a spark that's breaking out. Can't make a stop, can't turn back now.